I live in real estate offices. I go in offices, I see agents in offices, I go, what are you doing here? I'm here, I'm responding to email. I'm like, in the office? What are you doing? But you see, that behavior is endorsed.
Yeah. Welcome to the In Your Home podcast. I'm your host, Brett Rosenthal. This podcast is about real people and real homes in Philadelphia and other cities near you. As a realtor in Philadelphia, I get to see all types of homes and meet all kinds of people, and I want to share these experiences with everybody. Tons of unique homes and some amazing people is what you will hear and see. If you like what you hear, follow us on your favorite streaming platform. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the In Your Home podcast. Today we have a special guest who's actually going to talk about real estate a little. I'm going to let him introduce himself to you now.
All right. So I'm Scott Einbinder, and I've been in the real estate and banking business for pretty much my entire life. It's the only thing I've ever done. I have one of those very, very lucky careers where, both from a production standpoint, and I owned several companies and sold them successfully. And after I did that for about the first 20, 25 years in the industry, I was invited to an office to share some of my perspectives, just as a friend. And I went to this little office. There was about 6 or 7 agents. And I basically terrorized those agents, try to understand what they're doing, how are they going to make money. They had these antiquated ways of thinking. I tried to convince them to quit. There was some crying. There was some blood on the walls. But at the end of the day, it was a lot of fun. And a couple of days later, I got a phone call from some broker up in North Jersey who got me on the phone, who I did not know. He said, "Hey, Scott, I heard you just did a seminar over at so-and-so's office." And I go, "I did?" He goes, "What do you charge for that?" And I made up a number, and I now started my 17th year doing this. So unlike most trainers and speakers out there who failed in the industry and kind of found their way into doing something, which is a magic trick on of itself, I'm kind of the reverse. I kind of had a lucky career and kind of got into this as a fluke. And I just love motivating, inspiring, and really kind of creating completely new way of doing business. I've been doing that my whole career, and now it's more important than ever.
Yep. So the way I found Scott was through it was either a Facebook or an Instagram post where he was doing a video saying, what was it, like 22?
Yeah, it was the 22 most important minutes that I think a real estate agent needed to hear. And basically, it was really a 22-minute rant, basically telling agents and brokers and leaders to get over this lawsuit, right? This lawsuit's over. And everyone was bitching and moaning and whining and complaining that it's communism, it's unconstitutional, how dare they? And I'm like, listen, this case is over. Why don't you take that energy and figure out how you're going to make money? Look for the opportunity. Look for all the good things that are in this. And there's many good things. But this industry is an industry that hasn't changed much. It doesn't like change. People don't like change. But when you have leadership flowing down this anti-change perspective and the anger and the hostility, I just needed to go on there and try to share my frustration in hearing so much of it. And, it's worth listening to.
Yeah. So I listened to it, and I'm probably the minority, if I had to guess, that actually thought it was great, because I'm sick of hearing these agents just complain about, since I've started, it started with COVID and just complaining. Then the mortgage rates going up, and it was just complaining, and now this. So when I heard it, I agreed, and I posted, "This is great," to which my brother wrote, "He's on something or medicated or needs to be medicated."
Right. Well, full disclosure, I probably do need to be medicated, although I'm not on any drugs. I've never done drugs. I don't even drink. But I got a lot of passion, and I think this business is a great business. I think we do an incredibly valuable thing for consumers. But my frustration has always been that our industry has not set a very high bar. We know that there's a very low bar to get a license. In most states, you need more hours as a mentorship program to cut hair before they'll give you a license than help people manage the biggest transaction of their life. So there's a low entry bar of entry. But what's always frustrated me about the business is that broker owners have a pretty low bar as well. They bring people in without any real vetting. Those signs that say "now interviewing." They've been hanging out there for years, and people think they just caught it right, you know? So with such a low bar, we know that there is, in many cases, a very low delivery of a high-quality service to consumers. And while, listen, I live in a world at what we call the premium end, where we provide what I think the highest level of it, there's just way too many agents that have always been allowed to operate at this low level with full endorsement, in my view, from leadership. In fact, many brokers will tell you half of their office is non-productive, in many cases more than that. And I would say, well, why? Why do you keep them? And many brokers have the attitude, well, listen, it doesn't really cost me anything, right? They're independent contractors. They're not costing me anything. I'm not writing checks for them to be here. And I would say, well, what is it costing the experience that the consumer is having? I mean, how do you expect an agent who doesn't go to training, doesn't go to sales meetings, doesn't really participate, isn't really all in, isn't really somebody they even like? Why do you keep them? And I would get that dead stare look. So my passion comes from the place of helping agents who want to take this career and to earn an income that is equivalent to what a Harvard law graduate earns, to what a surgeon can make. I mean, can you imagine without a college diploma, people can earn hundreds of thousands of dollars, even in the millions? So it's a tremendously opportunistic business, yet there's always this alternative perspective of let's bring everybody and their brother into the business and let's see how they do. I just don't think, I think these new times might actually change that. So I'm optimistic.
Okay. So why do you think, I think the percentage is like 90% of agents basically drop out within 2 years or something like that. Why do you think that is?
Well, the numbers, I think, closer to the high 80%.
Okay.
I think that is because, again, the low bar of entry, the lack of accountability. You know, one of the other, I think, antiquated views that broker owners and leaderships have done with their agents is they said, listen, they're independent contractors. We can't tell them what to do. First off, you can tell them what to do. In fact, I think you have an obligation to tell them what to do. But the idea behind accountability is something that's very alluring to this business. A lot of agents get into this business because there is no accountability. Nobody's telling them what to do. Nobody's breathing down their neck. Nobody's on top of them. While that appears like a blessing, it's also the curse. So I think that this high fallout has a lot to do with the complete lack of accountability that agents have. And it's not their fault. That's not what the brokers or leadership demands of them. So I think you have a lot of that. And then again, you have a lot of lack of differentiation. You know, when you go out there and deal with consumers and your selling proposition is the exact same selling proposition of 800,000 other people, it's kind of hard to succeed. So I think lack of unique value propositions and lack of real differentiation is what hurts a lot of people who shouldn't be in the business. And by the way, a lot of people that get their license, they're not salespeople. And I think that leadership has an obligation to identify that. Just because an agent knows a lot of people and is popular or might even be good looking, those are not very good criterias to be a successful salesperson. And I don't really think that people that hire a lot of agents look at those qualities of salesmanship. They might be very responsible people. They might be very organized people, but they're not salespeople. And that matters.
So what would be like one thing? I agree. I'd say 90% of agents all do the exact same thing, post the exact same thing, think they have to do this exact same thing. And when I came into the business, I did do that briefly and then realized there's other ways to do it, and those other ways are making you look different than every other agent. What is like one thing you would like?
Well, the big thing, I think that agents, and by the way, this goes for new agents as well as experienced. There's a message that's floated out there when people get their license, and even it's all about referrals. It's all about maximizing opportunity out of your sphere. And I've always felt that's terrible advice, because one's sphere, and it doesn't matter how popular you are, it's a very limited universe. The unlimited universe is all the opportunity that exists outside your sphere. And who are those people? I call them the 5 categories: the for sale by owner, the expired listing, the pre-foreclosure short sale, the landlord who owns a 1 to 4 family property, and homeowners. These are people who live in a house who have absolutely no desire to sell their house today. But we know in time, life steps in, and they have death, divorce, disability, job change, relocation. And the question is, who do these people have a real relationship with? So all of that and most of those things are outside of one's particular sphere of influence. And my thing has always been to prospect for those listings, to prospect for those sellers. Those are where there is no secrets in this business. Everybody knows that the secret that everybody knows is that these are great opportunities. But the other reality we know is most agents don't go after it. Fear of rejection, untrained. A lot of the leaders who they work for never did it. So my suggestion not only has been, but now it's never been more important than ever, that if you're not prospecting outside your sphere of influence, in my opinion, you're probably almost out of business.
Okay. So I'm going to give you two types of realtors, I can't even say it. And let me know what you think the result of like this lawsuit could be for them or will be. The first one would be someone who does strictly or mostly listings.
Yeah.
How's that going to affect them?
I think that the listing agent income is going to triple. I think I don't like to call it this lawsuit. I like to call it this change of policy and this new way of doing things, because lawsuit's a negative word. This new way of doing things for listing agents is the greatest thing ever. The orbit that I navigate in the listing environment, nobody was upset about this lawsuit. In fact, we were thrilled. And we were thrilled for reasons because we think it's just going to improve the quality of realtors, and I think it's going to improve the quality of services that we deliver to consumers. So listing agents are going to be the tremendous beneficiaries of these changes. Why? While there's 1.5 million realtors, allegedly, we know that there's a very small percentage of pure listing agents. So that world is very small. And while we might see more jump into the listing space, which will make it more competitive, of course, that's a good thing for consumers. Competition is good for consumers. We will see certain listing agents leave because there are some listing agents who, quite frankly, don't do a wonderful job in servicing clients, and they've relied upon buyer's agents to sell their listings. And I think we're going to see an evolution, and I think that listing agents are going to become even more important, more dominant, more powerful, more effective in the scope of the industry. And I think incomes are going to rise significantly on that side.
So we kind of spoke before we got on. You mentioned what might happen if it's just the listing agent handling an entire transaction.
Well, it's interesting. Dual agency. Now, it's funny. Dual agency was never a hot topic. I mean, dual agency, in fact, most agents, when they had a listing that they sold themselves, they were celebrating. They rang the bell twice. You know those videos where they ring the bell when they get the office, which is cringy in itself? They'd be ringing the bell because they're thrilled to do both sides. But when this thing started perking up, and, dual agency is legal in 42 states. Mm-hmm. And while it's illegal in the other 8 states, there is a solution in place when the listing agent represents both sides. But it's legal. Now, when this thing started becoming more real, a lot of agents that saw dual agency as a potential threat, who was the threat to? It wasn't to the listing agent, it was to the buyer's agent. So the dual agency transaction, where a listing agent can represent both sides, I think it's an extremely viable option. While a lot of agents talk negatively about it, they say things like, well, first off, there's a tremendous amount of misinformation. They'll say, well, you can't have dual agency because a buyer has no representation. That's just not true. It's just, Brett, how do we get it through? A dual agent represents so then you have that. Then you get into the ethics. The same agent, you can't do it because it's not ethical. So are we saying that your colleagues are unethical? All these agents are they unethical people? Have you reported them to the ethics committee? No, zero. We know one thing. There is very little trading on dual agency and how to properly navigate that transaction. First off, they often make the analogy of it a lawyer. Like a lawyer can't represent the plaintiff or the defendant. Well, let's understand that situation. And it's a terrible analogy. Mm-hmm. First off, a plaintiff and a defendant, they have 2 separate agendas. Mm-hmm. A buyer and seller have a similar agenda. Attorneys are dealing with people who are fighting. Buyers and sellers aren't fighting. Buyers and sellers are looking for solutions and compromise and cooperation. Those are the skills of a negotiator.
Right.
But all these agents that go, well, I need to represent. We have to fight for our client. Tell me how you're fighting. So there's an issue on an inspection. What are you going to do? Throw down, take my offer, or we're going to, I mean, come on. It is not the analogy that great listing agents have to learn, if they don't know it already, the skill of, again, inclusion, compromise, setting the right expectations of buyers and sellers. To me, transparency is a good thing. But the first thing that has to happen is people have to dispel the myth that somehow there is a loser and a winner in these dual agency situations. There's compromise always. In two agent transactions, there's compromise. All it's changing is the skill set. And I think that's going to be a very viable option. I think a lot of buyers, and we all know a lot of millennial buyers, a lot of younger buyers, they see a benefit of going to the listing agent directly. Now, while there's a host of agents who say you don't want to do that, you're going to be misrepresented, you're going to get no representation, you're going to get taken advantage of. All of these negative, hostile things that might be their feelings, but we certainly don't see it in fact. And that's kind of what I think we're going to start seeing more of.
So when I see the thing that says listing agent, there's just going to be a listing agent, and all agents are saying, well, then you're not going to get any buyers.
Yeah.
How would you?
So first off, there's going to be choice. Under what is now the preliminarily approved proposed settlement, right? It was proposed, now it's been preliminarily approved. A seller still, at least today, has the opportunity to offer some compensation. So what we're talking about now is choice. If a seller wants to offer compensation and sees that benefit, at least now they can still do it. Now that might change in the future. There might be a complete decoupling, but right now it still exists. So a seller will have choice. Now what will also be nice is the fact that the seller doesn't have to predetermine what that fee is. The way it was, let's say a seller would offer out a commission of 2.5 or 3. That was cast in stone. Once that offer was submitted, there was no renegotiation of compensation, right? Even if the buyer's agent did a terrible job, there was no renegotiation of that fee, right? In fact, they could sell that property, go to Cancun for 2 months, come back on the day of closing, collect their check. Nobody could argue it. So the reality is that sellers are going to have choice. Do I think buyer agents are going to be extinct? Absolutely not. But what I do think is now that you have competition on commission, never had that before. Never was there buyer agents competing with each other with consumers on their commission, like listing agents. Listing agents have had to compete on that for forever, right? Sellers have had the choice to pay 0, be a FSBO, or list with a premium broker. What have they chosen historically? Go with premium brokers. So on the seller side, it's proven. We don't really know what's going to happen on the buy side. I think anyone who's going to tell you they know what's going to happen, it's all about what we think. Will buyers, if it comes down to having to write a check for the buyer agent commission, maybe they will. And I know a lot of agents, Brett, who are screaming from the mountaintop that they're worth every single dollar of their commission. And you know what my answer is? Then what are you worried about?
Yeah.
Then they'll pay it. Oh, well, they don't have the money. Hold on a second. Do we live in a world where I want something? I want that. I want that service. I want that product. I just don't have the money. So somehow I'm going to find somebody else to pay for it? I don't think we live in that world, but that's been our industry.
Yeah.
And the attitude that somehow we're just entitled to it because the seller has the equity. So let's get it from him. When agents say, and I've heard this was another big one. They say, well, buyers aren't going to be able to afford a buyer's agent. Have you heard that?
Mm-hmm.
In fact, they've said, oh, the low to moderate income buyer, they're really going to get hurt. The single mom with no money. And why do they say single mom? They never say single dad. But that's it. Why is the single mom not going to be able to afford a buyer's agent? When I heard that, that made, to me, a real revelation of the character of this business. Because here's what it said. It said, wait a minute. Buyers aren't going to be able to afford buyer's agents because everyone's going to get together and we're going to keep this commission at 2.5% and 3%. Of course not. In fact, if competition has taught us anything over the history of this country, is that prices usually come down when there's competition, or efficiency will go up. Who knows? But the reality is that buyer agents are going to compete on commission. We'll probably see agents working for a fraction of what the current norm is. And we also have the reality that there's going to be some listing agents who will be dual agents, who will represent both sides, where they will earn their, let's call it their premium from a seller because they provide a different value proposition to sellers. And they might be willing to represent buyers, and they're representing them. It's not no representation for a fraction. And in some cases, zero to manage both sides.
Yeah.
And let's face it, everyone talks about the bad things, and which are all feelings, not facts, but let's talk about the good things. In fact, do you know who the number one group who complains about buyer agents? The group who angry, complain, eviscerate them on, you know who it is? Agents. Listing agents have had to often carry the water for the bad buyer's agent. Maybe those days are over.
Might be. What happens? So what would you say the second group, I guess, would be like the agents that strictly like answer the Zillow leads and run out and work with buyers?
I think that that business, in my opinion, is going to change monumentally. I think we know with fact that in certain markets around this country, in fact, if you go to most MLS data and you look at agents that do transactions, there are some boards around this country where 70% of the members haven't done a transaction in 12 months. Now you take that office, but why do these people stay in the business? Well, you know what? If I can sell a few houses a year, a couple, to some friends and family, make 8,000 times 3, it's a great part-time income. Some of them might do more than that. It's a great business. But now you have to include this having to ask them for money. And now that you have to ask, or you might have to ask a friend or family member or somebody who you kind of know for a check, I think it's going to be different. And I think a lot of those people are going to look for alternative solutions. So I think that I say the bad buyer agent, and when I say bad, I don't mean a bad person, but they're just not in this business full throttle. I think that's going to be the casualty of war in terms of this time. So I think they're going to be gone. I think that the buyer agent that's just worked Zillow leads and had good success with buyers, they must transition to become a prospector for listings. I don't think they're going to have income relevancy if they don't.
Yeah.
I think that it is no longer, listen, there was a lot of buyer agents, they go, I just don't like sellers, I don't like prospecting, I don't like listings. They could say that because they would sell houses. But if that revenue stream is pared down significantly or gone, you're either going to be out of the business or you'll jump over to the other side. And the thing I found is there's a lot of really good buyer's agents who just haven't gone into the listing space, not because they couldn't do it, but they just didn't want to. But I think they can transfer those skill sets towards working with sellers. And let's face it, the team leaders out there, what's been the team? It's been the listing agent at the top feeding buyer leads to their team members. A lot of these team members, not you, they get frustrated. They're like, they're making all the money. I mean, I'm here sitting in an open house from 1 to 4, and they're in the Hamptons. I want to be the listing agent. So maybe those people, we have to help them move over into the team leaders need to cultivate and train listing agents. Now, some don't want that. I know team leaders, they don't even let their team members get a listing because it's all theirs. They want the listing, they want the credit, they want the production.
I hate that.
I think the pivot. And again, people love saying they have teams. I love that. I mean, I have a team. I love it. Teams. I go, tell me about the productivity of your team. They're productive, but the team members are like dying. So I think we're going to see a change in teams as well.
Okay. What do you think about this scenario? You're the listing agent and you list the property where you're making 3.5% and the other agent's making 2.5%.
Right.
What's your opinion on that?
Currently, first off, to me, I have to unpack it a little bit. I say the buyer agent could earn 5.5. The only problem is we don't know what that experience is going to look like. One of the problems is we've offered out 2.5, not knowing anything about the agent, not knowing their level of experience, knowing nothing about that. But we also knew nothing about the offer. But yet it was precasted in stone before we knew anything. So to me, do I think it's fair? The one thing about fairness is it's very subjective. The ultimate determination of fair isn't me, isn't you. It's going to be the consumer. And I think that the concept of keeping 3.5, putting out 2.5, because I think your question is, well, is it fair for the buyer agent to make less? I've always felt the hardest part of this business was getting the listing. That's just, again, my opinion. I think that, listings aren't just blinking an eye and getting it. You've got to cultivate them. It's hard work. It's a lot of nurturing when you're doing it right. So I just believe fundamentally that listing agents are more valuable than buyer's agents, just in the wholesale assessment. I just have that belief system because you are getting somebody to commit for a period of time. There's an asset involved. There's a house. There's sticks. There's wood. There's lots of things that exist. But the buyer execution, it's more about kind of there's an intangible there. And I think to mechanize and monetize that intangible from the beginning is very hard. You only know the value of that thing until the end.
Right.
So I think that the 2.5, but the other side of it is, and this is really the loaded question is, and this is where the industry has been so disappointing to me, is this concept that if you don't offer out a 2.5% commission or you don't offer out a premium commission, agents say it with impunity. They go, well, buyer agents aren't going to bring buyers. Well, the first thing I say, Brett, what world do we live in where buyer agents bring buyers? Don't buyers bring buyer agents to properties?
Yep.
I mean, there's a thing called Wi-Fi, the internet. I mean, 95% of transactions, the buyer introduces the property to the agent. And I know we show the kitchen. We tell them this is the kitchen because we think they might think it's the planetarium, right? We let them know this is the living room because they would never figure that out on their own. So the idea that buyer agents somehow control buyers' ability to get to a property, the fact that there's still agents that say that, it's so disappointing. First off, aside from the lack of ethics, would you agree? Is it unethical? Yeah. If a buyer wants to see a property and the agent looks and sees there's no or little compensation the way it is right now, and somehow tries to convince the buyer not to see it, is that unethical?
It's not unethical.
How about they say to the buyer, listen, it's a great house, but I got 38 others I want you to see first? All of those behaviors have been endorsed, have been looked away, but yet have been up. And in fact, everyone who criticizes me, because I've got a million comments of agents go, Scott, great theory. Nobody's going to bring their buyers. I go, why aren't other agents calling that agent out? Because some of those agents are going, I agree. And for me, I ain't bringing them either. And that, to me, is part of the disappointment of how agents have reacted to this whole thing. But again, this is good news.
Yeah.
This big picture here, this is good news. It's good news for consumers, and it's good news for good agents. It's bad news for bad agents. Who's got a problem with that?
No, it's probably good.
Probably.
So the reason I even brought
Why
that
would
up...
it probably be good?
Well,
if bad agents get out.
It's bad for the ones... It's bad for the ones that have to get out. But it's good for the good agents in the business.
And who else is it good
and
for?
The client.
And the client. Remember that? We always forget the clients.
I never forgot the clients.
I know.
I mean, so I'm a little probably different. If I found out I was getting zero commission for bringing the buyer and the buyer really wanted to see that house and nobody, I would attempt to get it somewhere else. But if I
Where would you get it from?
I would go to the listing agent.
And what if the listing agent says, thank you?
Eventually, I would try any way I could. And if the answer was no, I would still bring them.
Well, but you also
because I look at it as a business that maybe they'll refer their friends.
You also have another option.
Yeah.
If there's no compensation that the seller is paying, if the listing agent says thank you for your interest, but the seller just is not going to offer compensation, and the buyer wants to see that house, and there's no money in it for you, there is another choice. What other choice do we have? It's not to go try to steer them somewhere else. It's to say, can't work with you. You got to find somebody who can. Will there be somebody who? We know there will be. Maybe it'll be the list. So we do have another choice. The agent has the option not to work with that buyer. And we might see that as well. And I think that high-quality agent such as yourself, you're probably doing the right. See, the way a high-quality agent will respond to that, if there's no money from the buyer and there's no money from the seller, they're going to say to the buyer, listen, I don't want to be the one to stand in front of your dreams because I can't get paid. Here's 4 different ways in which you can get there. Sadly, I can't be part of that equation, but maybe I'll be part of your life sometime in the future. What's wrong with that? That, to me, totally ethical.
Yeah.
Totally honest. Totally transparent. You know what? I may not benefit today, but maybe I'll benefit somewhere else down the line. That's the way I think agents need to start thinking. That's certainly the way my orbit thinks.
Yeah. So the reason I brought up that different percentage, I've had 2 situations where I actually, one where I did do it and one where I wish I would have done it. The one where I did do it, it was like a referral situation. Someone from Tampa referred me to a client moving to Philly. Listing their house. They lived in Philly, but it was an agent from Tampa, and they wanted 40%. I knew it would be like an easy sale. I took it.
The referral agent
wanted, which is more than typically.
Of course.
But for me, it would have been an easy sale, and I did it. So when I listed the property, I made it 3.5% for the listing agent to try to recoup some of the money I was giving up, and 2.5.
Yeah.
And the agent that ended up bringing the buyer, made a huge thing of it.
What did the agent want?
He wanted it to be even, and he said that I'm ruining the industry, and it's always been that way. He's never seen it. Just because you pay for pictures doesn't mean you should get more.
Yeah.
All kinds of stuff like that.
Of course.
And I explained that there was this huge referral, and it ended up being fine, but it was the whole thing. The second situation was...
just on that point.
Yeah.
See, I don't think, first off, and I understand that we, since when do we have to justify our compensation to another realtor? But that aside, I don't think that your 3.5% had anything to do with a referral fee. To me, the 3.5% should be because you bring your seller services and strategies and value-added benefits that substantiate your 3.5. I don't think a 3.5 is justified because of a referral fee. It's justified because what am I getting from you, right? I have a phrase I use. It's called net dollar benefit. Do I have a better net dollar solution for my seller than the other person they're looking to consider, right? Because that's really at the end of the day what it's all about. What is the seller's net? And are we maximizing seller's net? So the reality is that net dollar in the pocket of the seller really doesn't have anything to do with commission. It has to do with all the other services and strategies that you do for your clients to put more money in the pocket. So, I've never felt that commission, even if you offer out a 10% commission, if it's not priced right and you're not doing all the things necessary to have a good experience on the sell side, it really doesn't matter what you offer out. And that's that response that you got from that agent.
Yeah.
Again, as soon as you hear from anyone, this is the way it's always been.
And I'm going to get killed for just saying what I just said.
That's the red flag. Well, why are you going to get killed?
Because there's tons of agents out there most of them been here doing it forever, and they're just going to say that's not the way it should be.
So let's do this, because the agents who are going to come after you or me, I've made this offer to almost every single person who comes with me. I go, listen, let's do this. Let's go live together. Let's go live on Zoom. Let's go live. Let's invite the public in, and let's have it out.
Mm-hmm.
And let's see who the public supports. You take your arguments and positions. I'll take mine. I've made the request over 250. I haven't had one person. So the agents that want to attack you, and I hope that they can be introspective, because it's not easy in life to be that way. Let's face it, it's very easy to criticize others. It's almost impossible to criticize ourselves. But all these agents that are saying that, they really need to be introspective. They need to say, listen, if your thing is the way it's always been, If that was the attitude of the day, we'd be sitting here by a lake. We'd be, chiseling out things on stone. We'd be riding horse and buggies to the store. Come on, we are a society. We are an economy of innovation and progress. And anybody who wants you to stop innovating and stop progress, in my view, they're already out of business. They just don't know it yet.
And then the other side of it was I was offering 3% to an agent, and me and my coworker were listed a house. And the minute the contract was signed, the agent just disappeared. We'd call, be like, could you take his client for a walkthrough? I'm playing tennis.
Yeah.
It was like one thing after. He didn't come to the closing. He didn't do, but he was playing tennis.
Of course.
So could we do it? And we did it because we wanted the transaction to go through. But like in that case, we all thought we should have gotten a higher percent.
How much did that buyer agent get at closing?
It was 3% of like a $750,000.
But my point is that, do you know what's crazy about that scenario, which has bothered me my whole career? That agent knew with certainty that none of the people in the transaction had any ability to take a nickel away from them. Because, think about it, the buyer had zero ability to renegotiate. The seller, the very person who is funding the compensation, they couldn't. And the listing agent who entered it in, they couldn't either. What a deal! What a deal!
Yeah.
You see, this is what everybody has to realize, that the mechanics were not transparent. In fact, when you talk about the buyer, think about the buyer. Do you think that buyer knew before they ever saw your listing how much that agent was getting? Probably not.
Yeah.
Buyers never had a conversation about commission. And they would see it in the contract, but it was after, right?
Mm-hmm.
They didn't even. So we are now in a new world. So transparency. So to me, when agents say to you, or have an issue with it, say, what is your problem with transparency? What? And they go, oh, everybody knew. Like, it's like with listings. They said, oh, all the sellers knew. First off, they might have known, but it's not what they knew, it's what they were told. They were said, listen, if you don't offer out a premium commission, buyers are going to... What'd they do? Remember, in this lawsuit, they showed that in 30 markets around the country, 99% of the buyer agent commissions were 2.5% or 3%. Now that's called what? What do we call that? Price fixing. This is what happened. The industry was exposed. An industry I love. It's not that it's a bad industry, but we didn't have a culture of consumer first. Now, Brett, I'm hopeful it's consumer first. And the smart brokers and agents will figure out how to let the consumer win first and allow us to win next. And there's lots and lots and lots of profits and revenue and profitability in that equation.
Right.
But it requires ingenuity and some creativity.
And in that situation, most agents would have said, well, but he's getting 3% because he brought the buyer to you. And I would say, probably the buyer found it online and told the agent it was the same.
Yeah, I mean, there was a day, listen, I've been in this industry my whole life. Yeah. It used to be, and Brett, you were probably in your car seat, if a buyer wanted to buy a house in Germantown, they'd call up an agent and say, are there any houses for sale in Germantown? Any houses for sale in Bucks? Any houses for sale? And the agent would say, I'll get back to you in a couple of days. And the buyer would wait. And the agent would say, oh, I found 4. That's been gone for 15 years. But the culture, when agents say, I brought the buyer, in most of the cases it's not the case. Sometimes.
Yeah.
And by the way, on the buyer side, I do think that there is a revenue opportunity on the buyer side. For what? I think there will be buyer agents who are going to become what we call house hunters. They're going to look for houses not on the MLS, if it exists, or not on the open market. They're going to go out house hunting. And in my view, that does carry a higher level of revenue opportunity. And I think there are buyers, I don't think all of them will say, listen, you find me the house that I want, I'll give you a check for X. To me, makes sense.
Yeah.
You found something that they couldn't find on their own. That has value. I think there will be agents that will represent investors who are looking for specific type of properties. And if they find them, they'll earn it because the investor has factored that into the equation. I think there's other short sale opportunities. There are ways in which, buyer agents can represent buyers in short sale situations where the sellers of the property, remember, the sellers can still offer, but in these cases, it's the lender that's making the decision. But that's still part of the transaction where compensation can be given. I don't know are you familiar with negotiated settlements? These are transactions where they are in pre-foreclosure and investor buyers approach the attorney representing the bank before it actually goes to litigation, where they try to negotiate that before it really ever gets to court. Mm-hmm. These are unique scenarios, but investors would pay buyers, agents, compensate. So there are going to be lanes for it, and I think they will emerge. But again, the typical retail, Bob and Mary Smith, I think you got to think of another way to do it.
Right. And what'd you say that you said in Miami, the percentage of renewing?
In Miami, the real estate agent population is down 35%. And this was even before the formal announcement of this thing. So there are a lot of markets around the country where the renewals are down 10, 15, 20, 25%. And that's before things have even been enacted. I think we're going to see another wave when buyers start to go through this, when buyer agents meet with a buyer, and a buyer, they have to now get them to sign this, what do we call it?
Buyer agency.
See, I don't really like to call it a buyer agency agreement because that sounds really nice and sweet. What it really is a contract.
Okay.
We're looking for a contract.
Yeah, and now I'm thinking of the consumer notice. The consumer notice says at the top, this is not a contract.
But this will now be a contract.
All right.
And the idea is that a buyer agent is going to have to sign a contract. What you're going to do for me, what's the term, how much you charge. So if the buyer agent wants to work that way, there are going to be buyer's agents who will work at what they call non-exclusive relationships, where it will be less binding, which I think buyers will probably be more comfortable signing. Yeah. Because I don't know about you. I mean, a buyer meets you 5 minutes at a coffee shop and is going to sign an agreement for 6 months to have you as my exclusive agent. And if I can't buy anything else without you, if I call and I see a house on a Sunday and you're in Mexico, sorry, can't buy. I mean, I don't know how it's going to work. So I think that the buyer agency agreement, it's a good thing. It's transparency, disclosure, upfront, knowledge. And again, to the buyer agent who believes like the sky is blue, they're worth every penny, you got nothing to worry about. But if they won't pay you, got to look introspectively.
So with realtors and training in general, what has been like something that's like stopped them from like going out and getting new clients or?
So first off, I think I would use the word training very loosely. I think a lot of training in real estate offices have become storytelling. It's, top agents getting up there, telling the story about the tough listing they got. Stories. And a lot of these agents are sitting listening to these stories going, listen, you're Superman, but I'm not. I can never do that. It's a great story. That's why everybody's enamored with, Bravo TV and those people. It's a storytelling. It's not training. So really, it starts out, what is training? Training, if you simply educate agents with zero accountability and execution, it is a complete waste of time. In fact, I say most training programs that exist inside of real estate offices are a total waste of time. They just give training for the sake of we give training. But remember, all these agents going through training, you got the same 80% that are leaving the business. Right. Somebody has to say that maybe there's something wrong with the training, right? They're all going through the training program and they're all failing. You got to look at the training. Because training even of itself is a waste of time. But when you train and you fuse that with accountability and execution, it's a whole different business. So one of the things I suggest certainly to broker owners and leaders is, you've been in some offices where they still have those production boards up on the wall. I say rip those things down and put an activity board. Strictly start looking at your agents on what activities they're doing daily and make them accountable to you. Sit down with them. Have you ever seen realtors or brokers or managers ask agents for business plans?
Yes.
How long has that been going on for? Forever.
Since I've done it. I don't like it.
And every agent does a business plan on January 1st. Mm-hmm. And just like the gym they joined on January 1st, they've thrown that business plan away by the 11th day of the month. They've canceled their gym membership on the 11th day. They don't do it. So business plans are another one of those things that sound good, but all it is, in most cases, an agent goes back to 2023, deletes it, puts on 2024, prints out the same thing. So business plans, to me, are a complete waste of time. They talk nothing about intent. What I say is have every one of your agents create an action plan. This is different. Don't tell me the 10 things you intend to do. Let's come up with the 5 things that you will do that are non-negotiable. And those non-negotiable tasks should be, how many homeowners are you developing a relationship with each day? How many people who are selling their house without representation are you introducing yourself to? How many, what I call conversations of value, are you having with homeowners that might be landlords who might be thinking of selling their house in the future? How many people in pre-foreclosure have you found, met, engaged with? You didn't hear me say how many listings did you get? How many contracts? I think it's critical to manage agents on activities and make them accountable to those activities. And if they don't do the activities, they don't do them. Do something which is almost considered blasphemy. Let them go. You always hear about how many agents were hired. You never hear about how many agents were fired. You know how you see, like, welcome to the family? Mm-hmm. I always think there should be an SS. The family says goodbye. Everybody waving, goodbye. And you see the agent packing up their box and driving away, like, clapping. By the way, you know who you're doing a very good thing for? That agent. Okay? You're helping them. You're doing the right thing. It's called doing the right thing. So agents that, manage activities. And so it starts with that. And I think every agent out there should focus on those 5 categories. And this other reason why they don't do it, people say it's like fear of rejection, right? You've heard that. People don't do it because they're afraid of getting rejected. First off, they're not afraid of getting rejected. They're terrified of getting rejected. It's not about fear. It's about terror. And I think as leaders, we don't help agents understand and digest what rejection and failure really means. We all digest rejection and failure as a bad thing because that's the way we're taught, right? When you bring home an F when you're young, your parents aren't taking you to hibachi that night. There's no celebration. We learn both at home and in academia that failure is a bad thing. The only where it's a good thing is in sales. Failure is a badge of honor in sales. We don't teach this. We first have to deprogram agents into understanding what rejection and failure is. It is the best thing that can happen in sales because it is where you develop all the necessary emotional intelligence to be able to carry on with business. And we just don't build that muscle in agents. We actually, when agents come in crying because they got thrown out of the seller's house, we say, oh, I'm sorry, you did good, I'm sorry. No, you've got to go and you've got to they've got to learn. And to me, part of those activity boards, how many sellers threw you out of their house that day? The more, the better. So I think it's the processing and the development of the positivity that happens through rejection and failure. And most human beings know exactly how to avoid failure and how to avoid rejection. We know that. This is what makes us so smart. You know how you avoid it? Don't do it. If I don't get the door slammed in my face, I know exactly how not to get the door slammed in my face. Don't knock. Don't go. And it gives the illusion that we're not failing. In fact, the number one failing activity that happens every day in a real estate office, that happens with 70% of agents every minute of the day, are all the things that they are not doing, right? I live in real estate offices. Mm-hmm. I go in offices, I see agents in offices, like, what are you doing here? I'm here, I'm responding to email. I'm like, in the office? What are you doing? But you see, that behavior is endorsed. Yeah. Lack of action is endorsed because we don't think we can tell them what to do. In fact, you have an obligation to tell them what to do. And if they don't do it, you also have an obligation. You know who the obligation's to? Consumer. You have an obligation to the consumer to tell your agent what to do. And I hope this culture and I hope this dynamic, I think it will change. I think that what's going to be left are going to be agents that are going to be more open for those things. And I think leadership will maybe transition from this drunken, toxic need to recruit. It's been the blood. I mean, everywhere you go, recruit. Come join us. Welcome to the family. Come. This appetite to recruit. What has it done? It's diluted the good people. It's hurt the consumer. Like, so I can say I got 400,000 agents in my office? Who gives a damn? How many are profitable? How many are productive? And how many are serving consumers at the highest level? Oh, we got none of those. So I think the appetite to recruit might change.
Right.
And I think those that are in this business, you know, we call it full-time, part-time. I think full-time and part-time is a mentality. I know agents that have full-time jobs who work real estate part-time, but their part-time work is more effective than full-time agents.
Yeah.
So you can be part-time, time-wise, but never be part-time mentality-wise. And I think, again, it's the responsibility of leadership. When agents fail, I think it's just like students. Teachers fail. You got failing agents, you got failed leadership.
I got myself and probably half the agents on my team at least daily get a text from another team or a company recruiting, asking for coffee. And the big joke on my team is like half of them don't drink coffee.
Yeah.
And they're like, I don't want coffee.
Yeah, I don't like coffee. Exactly. But let me ask you this.
It's the same line as everyone.
And I would even take it one step further. Do you know where every one of your team members are right now?
Everyone?
Okay. So there's someone out there. They got into this business, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed.
Yeah.
They don't know what they're doing. They don't know what they're doing. And again, if we had employees, if you were paying these people, not you, but if the company was writing a check, you know, $5,000 a week, you would never allow them to be MIA. But we allow it. I say we have to look at it that way.
All right.
While you might not be writing a check, you have a commitment. And that commitment's worth way more than whatever. And so the idea is I think that, again, those agents who get recruited away, it's never really only because of compensation. It's that they just didn't feel that they were getting what they needed. And, you know, I think that leadership has to, you know, strength is a good thing, you know. And if you have an agent who doesn't respond well, they don't want to be told what to do. Don't tell me. Don't ask me. I don't know. I think that's a big red flag. But the agent who says, you know what, hold me accountable, right? Ride me like a Bronco pony. That one's going to be successful. The best ones want accountability. The worst ones don't.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we discussed a lot. Why don't you just tell everyone how they get
So basically, you can follow me on Instagram at the Scott Einbinder Effect. That's where I kind of post, you know, hopefully funny but provoking things, not to create too much angst out there, but it really isn't. And you're always welcome to comment. Better only be good ones. But if you want to comment, please make your comment, make your argument, give me your position. But, you know, always be open for me to call you, because I sometimes do that. I sometimes like to call people who make a comment. And when I don't want to talk to you, why not? I mean, I'm a very weak. I got no muscles. So you can always get a hold of me there. What I do is I'm just a resource to those in the industry who want to do what they do better, faster, more efficient, and with more revenue potential. I lean on the listing side of the business. While we have certain buyer options, like I mentioned, I help agents from kind of the mid-producer level all the way up to the highest levels. You know, when you're making, you know, when you're doing a high six-figure income, how do you double it? How do you triple it? I mean, when you're pulling everything out of your sphere, how do you double it? Well, the way you double it is you got to do something different. And that's kind of the world I navigate in.
Perfect.
All right.
Thank you so much for
My
coming
pleasure.
on.
Thank you.
It was great.
Thanks for all the good things you're doing.
You too. Thanks.
Okay.